All right. Hello, my name's Pete Hammond. I'm going to moderate today. This is a really special movie, I have to say. And I'm very happy to introduce you, first off, to the film's producer, Peter Saraf, right here. Yeah, right there. And the director just did Can You Ever Forgive Me and Diary of a Teenage Girl. She's so talented. Please welcome Marielle Heller.
Thanks, Pete.
It's so funny because, I've been watching the movie again for the second time since the Toronto premiere, and I have that song in my head, Won't You Be My Neighbor? Mm-hmm. That scene on the subway, did that really happen?
It did really happen. I mean, it's one of those things, if you wrote it in a script and it hadn't really happened, you'd be like, okay, that's too much. But because it really happened...
I love it. Watching it again, I think that's my new favorite scene in the movie.
Oh, good. Yeah.
There's so many, and you see so much the second time you see it. There's so much in this movie.
My parents went last night in their hometown of Alameda and took 50 people. No joke, literally 50 people. And my parents were saying, on this second viewing, I spent the whole time just watching Matthew Rhys's performance.
He's great, yeah.
And they were like, it's transformative. I mean, it's funny because... you can watch it multiple times and have very different experiences. It's like the first time it's all about Fred, and you watch Tom Hanks, and you need to take in Fred. And then the second time you can really watch Matthew Rhys in a different kind of way.
Of course, it's not, the Mr. Rogers movie. You never wanted to make that movie. We had that great documentary I just alluded to, Won't You Be My Neighbor, that Morgan Neville did, and someday this can be on a double bill at the New Beverly here or something,
It's a good double feature.
But that told us, the overall view. This is really Lloyd's story. He is the...
Well, we knew part of what I thought was so brilliant about the script when Peter sent it to me was... Fred doesn't actually make a good protagonist of a movie. For a narrative film, we need our protagonists to be pretty broken. They have to learn. They have to go on a major journey. I think of all of our classic protagonists over time. They need to go on a major journey. And the Odyssey, whatever. Fred is too far in his emotional evolution to be the protagonist, but he makes a great antagonist. And thinking of him as the antagonist of this story who elicits real change out of people who come into contact with him, that's what Fred really did. I mean, he would meet people and he had this uncanny ability to realize what somebody needed, what they were going through in their life, and to truly help them shift in a deep, fundamental way. And so we knew that the whole time. He couldn't be the protagonist. He was too good.
It's so good. Peter, this has been around for a few years, the idea of doing this movie. Several years. How many?
I've been working on it for about 8 years. Noah and Micah first started working on it
screenwriters.
About 10 years ago. Noah and Micah.
10 years.
Yeah, and when I first read the script, I fell in love with it so much that I didn't option it. I didn't put down a deposit to buy it later. I actually purchased the script and said, I will greenlight this movie right now and make it because it's so good. The only condition is we have to get the rights to the Fred Rogers material with the songs, the sets, all the things, and we had the rights to his life rights. That took 6 years.
Wow.
And that was...
And Peter was instrumental in that happening.
But it was... And the reason is that the people, Fred's family and the people who he worked with are very protective of his legacy, and rightly so, and don't want it to be exploited in ways that are for any means other than something really authentic. And so the only way to earn their trust was to get to know them, and for them to get to know us. Oh, sorry.
Just a little closer.
Yep. Was for them to get to know us and trust us. And the amazing thing about that experience was we got to know them. We got to know Fred a lot deeper, and we got to know the community of Pittsburgh where he lived and worked a lot deeper, and it changed us as people, and we made lifelong friends. And so it was the right process. I can't say it wasn't sometimes frustrating, but here we are.
But amazing and authentic. You got to shoot in the actual studio that he did Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
We shot this in WQED where he filmed all the episodes of The Neighborhood in the actual Studio A where they filmed Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
WQED
fan over there. I wear my WQED socks a lot.
When I was growing up, my dad worked for KQED in San Francisco, so it all came full.
Yeah, exactly. But we recreated the set so meticulously. Jade Healy, our production designer, and our entire team, we found the original blueprints from 1968 when they originally built the set. We built it. I mean, you can't believe the detail and the love that went into the rebuilding of this set. And we built it in his actual studio so much that when people who worked on the original Neighborhood came in, you would watch their jaws drop. And they would take it in and go, "Oh my God, it even smells right."
It even smells right. That's hilarious. What I loved, too, about this is the miniatures that you used throughout the movie as transitions, and made that, a common thing here. And that must have not been easy to put that all together. And the producer here is nodding his head.
It was not easy, but it was so fun. I've been talking about how when I was a kid, I used to build miniatures, and that was like the dorky thing in the script that I was so excited about was how do we put this together? Because I used to make Sculpey. My mom's an art teacher, so I spent my childhood like making miniatures, and the thought of getting to use the Mr. Rogers miniatures as this jumping off point for our inspiration for these miniature transitions to kind of bridge these two worlds and to keep the magic alive through the whole movie, keep this sense of play that was alive. And, we all got into making movies because we did things like that as a kid. We made miniatures when we were kids, or we did something like that. And Fred connected us all to our childhoods. He reminded us all of these parts of us that wanted to make movies for some very childlike reason. And it was fun to make a movie where it was like, right, why did I want to make a movie when I was a kid? How do I do that now? How do we have fun and play with the form in a way that's so playful? It was just joyful. And the week we shot miniatures was one of the most fun weeks. We can say that because the actors aren't here.
Very true. It was after we shot. But you got a little peek behind the scenes during the credits of some of the people who worked on the miniatures. And those mad geniuses were in a warehouse the entire prep and shoot. I mean, it was a
4 months at least of building those.
And figuring out how that little airplane, that was the craziest jerry-rig thing in the world, was going to take off and land in this jerky way. And they had so much fun but worked so hard.
And the miniatures that they rebuilt from the original Neighborhood, it was perfect. Every single house was exactly how they did it in the original Neighborhood. So that meant finding the sets from the 50s, the miniature building sets that they used to build. And then if they couldn't find them, they'd have to build them from scratch. But every single house is exactly how it was in the original Neighborhood.
And of course, the casting is perfect. All the actors are just fantastic. Chris Cooper, everybody, Susan. Alici plays Matthew's wife, Matthew Rhys, as Lloyd. But Tom Hanks.
You've heard of him?
I have. And so since you were developing this for so long, did you always have Tom Hanks, Peter, in your head that, when this movie gets made, it's got to be him? And you offered it to him a few times, I think.
I did. When you read the script, you go, this is the most beautiful script, but Fred Rogers is a really iconic character, so your stomach sinks and you go, who can play him? And then you have that great moment where you go, Tom Hanks, he could be Fred Rogers, that would be amazing. And so we did, we sent it to him, he passed, he didn't want to play another real character. He had played a lot of them. He recently played Walt Disney, another iconic children's entertainer figure. So he sort of was like, yeah, no. And then I think we did a new draft. We sent it to him again. He passed again. And then when Mari came on board, well, you can tell the story.
Yeah, Mari comes on board and they tell you, who'd be great.
Well, I'll go back a little bit. So I met Tom at a birthday party in 2015, a kid's birthday party. I'm friends with his son. And my kid was there playing with all the other kids in a backyard birthday party. And I'm sitting there talking to Tom Hanks, and he says, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm a director. And he went, oh, there was this really cool article in the New York Times this weekend about women directors in Hollywood. And I said, I'm in that. And he went, oh, you are? What did you direct? And I said, I made a movie called The Diary of a Teenage Girl. It's a little indie. And he went, well, I should watch that. And I thought, sure, Tom Hanks, sure you're going to go watch my movie. And because he's Tom Hanks and he is one of the most honest, real people in Hollywood, a week later I got an email and he said, I've watched your movie, let's have a meeting. And we sat down and had the loveliest meeting of like, what do you want to do next? I'd love to work with you. Let's find a way to work together. And but then everything he pitched me, I was kind of like, no. And then over the years, we kept in touch, and he kept checking in with me. And I was making Can You Ever Forgive Me, the movie I made last year with Melissa McCarthy.
Applaud for that.
And, you know, we kind of stayed in touch over the years. What are you working on? What are you working on? And so when Peter brought me the script for this, he said, listen, we've always wanted Tom Hanks. This has been our perfect casting. He's passed 3 times. And I said, well, this is weird to say, but I have a relationship with him. I mean, I could ask him, and he'll probably still say no, but I'll try. One last shot, right? And I
think I said, yeah, maybe there's a 2% chance.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, it did not seem likely. And I called him and said, listen, I want you to know how I see this. It's not a biopic. I'm not interested in making a biopic of Mr. Rogers. It's a character study. This is a very complex man, and we want to get to know him, not just in a like getting to know the facts kind of way, but in a deep way. And it's really about the cat and mouse game between these 2 men. And I don't want to do prosthetics. I don't want to do an imitation. I wouldn't want to do anything like that. So I think if we could pull this off, it would really mean something greater. Like it could mean something for the world. And he was like, okay, let me read it with that in mind. Knowing you're directing this, I'm going to read it with a different eye. And he came back like 3 days later and signed on. And it was the greatest miracle I've ever performed. I'll never do anything that cool again.
He said, I really want to do it, but you have to wait a year for me. Would you wait? And we were like, okay.
Yeah.
I think we can wait.
I think it was like not even a year. It was like
Wasn't
9 months. And when we started, he was like, on the very first day, I'll never forget, he came up to me and he said, thanks for waiting for me, boss.
Tom Hanks always walked on set. Hey, boss, what's up today?
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get some questions from them. But before I do, I just got to ask you, the opening scene when he walks in, it's so coordinated. You can tell the way Fred Rogers always came in, took off his jacket, put on the sweater, the shoes, so perfectly it seemed every single time. How many takes did you have to do to get that right?
I mean, you can tell it's all in one take, right?
Yeah.
It has to be all in one take
All
because
in
that's
one
how
take,
they
right?
filmed.
I know, it coordinated.
One shot.
Yeah.
That's how they filmed it. So I think it was 27. But the truth is there were some sweater malfunctions that happened along the way. So some of the takes got cut short. At some point, we're going to release that blooper reel of all of the sweater takes. But we hand knit the sweaters because Fred's mother made his sweaters for him in the beginning of the show. The sweaters were all hand knit. So we hand knit the sweater that Tom wore, which meant there were some little imperfections that caused some problems with the zipper. But yeah, it was a big scene, getting that scene right. I remember the day we filmed that scene, you know, it was the first day we filmed in the studio. It was the first day we unveiled our beautiful set, which we had been spending so many months building. And I kind of realized how much pressure was on this moment of, is Tom going to get it right? Are we going to get this moment of Mr. Rogers right? And I kicked everybody out. I kicked Peter out. I kicked everybody who had been working for years on this script. And I felt so bad about it. But I was like, you guys, you all have to leave because we are asking something of Tom Hanks that is profoundly difficult. And I have to get the most intimate performance from him in this moment. And you all got to get out of here. He can't have 200 people staring at him while he does this. And we made this set very quiet and very still. And I told him to picture his granddaughter on the other side of the camera. And that was it. We were just going to do it for her. And yeah, we did 27 takes. And we were so happy when we felt like we had it.
Well, I was so impressed just with the shoes because it takes me forever to get a shoe on.
And also I realized later that I made it harder on him than it had been on the real Fred because the real Fred had the first knot pre-done and I didn't do that. I had his fully open and I didn't realize till after we filmed it that he actually was doing something harder than Fred did.
And you know what? Margie Whitmer was Fred's producer for many, many years on the show. That show was produced by women along with Fred from the beginning. And Margie Whitmer told me at the New York premiere, she said, "Oh, we used to grease the zipper." I was like, "Margie." I mean, I can't tell you how many conversations we had with Margie about how they made the show.
Why didn't she tell us that?
She never told us about the laces, and she never told us about greasing. She was cute. She wanted it to be hard for us.
Oh my gosh.
And I made Tom sing live, which is also not what you do in movies. Like, nobody sings live in movies. But we had this idea that everybody was totally freaked out about. My brother, who did the music, and I were like, he's got to sing live because you have to hear all the mouth sounds and the mistakes and the,
The lavalier mic.
and the lavalier mic. It just needed to feel live. And there was not going to be any way to get that unless he sang live. And Tom was just so down for this. Like, he was like, great, we're going to sing live? Okay. So he had
Okay, boss.
Yeah, he had to do that whole thing with, Fred had done that thousands of times. It was down to a science, and Tom had to do it live.
And he did so well with Daniel Tiger. And
I know.
I mean, really.
He really puppeteered Daniel Tiger, too. Even in shots where you couldn't tell it was Tom, he would puppet him.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Let's see what you guys thought. You're a first weekend, second night audience here. Yes, right there.
A burning question, thank you. Recently, Tom, I don't know when it was aired, gave an interview on PBS NewsHour, and I'm sure, have you seen it?
I don't think so.
Well, he said that he was so amazing talking about your direction, and he said he was worried about certain things, and he articulated those, and he said that he would figure out the scene, especially with the writer scenes, and he'd come to you and he'd say, I got it, we got it, we're going to do it like this. And then he quoted you as saying, no, you're not going to do it like that. And so I wondered if you recognized that, and if you could share an example with us of something that you asked Tom to do.
Okay, she's just saying that your relationship in directing Tom would come and say, I got it, and then you would say, no, you don't quite have it. That I'm just the messenger here.
It's funny because I'm learning things on this press tour when I'm doing a lot of interviews with Tom and Matthew about like how tortured they were by me. No, I
love you.
I know, and I adore them. And Tom wrote me an email this morning that made me cry, just talking about how much this process has meant to him. But the truth of the matter is, I'm a hands-on director. I'm an actor. So I come from acting. I don't let actors off the hook. I get in the dirt with them.
All right.
And that means sometimes I have very specific ideas about how a scene needs to sound, particularly. I hear scenes before I can really see them. I kind of hear the rhythm of how a scene has to go in order to work. I read the script out loud a lot to myself, and I kind of, I don't know, I can kind of hear it. But that does mean sometimes I'm really in it with the actors. And a lot of what I was doing with Tom with this, I felt like I was the authenticity police. I was there to say if something felt truthful. And the thing about Fred, if he said, how are you doing this morning? He didn't say, how are you doing this morning? He said, how are you doing this morning? He took the time to really ask. And that meant I had to ask Tom to be so present in every moment. I can remember this moment that is actually not in the movie anymore, but when he and Matthew are saying goodbye, Matthew says, thank you so much. And then Fred says, no, thank you. And the first time we did it, Tom said, no, thank you. And I said, I don't think you thanked him. And he went, what? And I was like, you need to thank him. Thank him. And it was like, oh, okay. Is those kind of moments where I'm just there to say, no, we're going to really take the time to thank him in that moment. So, yeah, I guess I was a hard ass.
I have to say, too, the scene, I really noticed it this time in the cafe between the two of them where he says, let's have a moment of silence. That is a very kind of risky and daring thing to do in a major motion picture. And you could not hear a pin drop here watching that. They were totally rapt.
Well, it was a moment that was the clearest to me from the moment I read the script, what I knew that scene had to be. It's the moment Mr. Rogers, he asked kids to be active participants in his show, and we wanted our audience to be active participants in this movie. And the beautiful thing about Fred's message, he was known for doing that. He did that at the Emmy Awards. He also did that at dinner parties. But the beautiful thing about that scene is we would be even in the sound mix with people who'd seen this movie hundreds of times, who'd gone over the same beats moment, over and over and over again. We'd sat in the room for 12 hours a day just running over the same moments. We would be working on that scene, and I would watch guys, working on the soundboards, doing this on their, and I would just see people taking a moment, thinking about the people who loved them into being, and then going back to work. It was like you can't help but take that time.
And there's one thing you may not have noticed. We pan around the room in that restaurant, and we had this idea that in this moment where Fred is asking us to think about the people who loved us into being, that we would populate that restaurant with people who Fred loved. So when you pan around the room, Joanne Rogers, his wife, is there, the real Bill Eisler, David Newell, who played Mr. McFeely in the show, Margie Whitmer, and Hedda Sharapin, who worked with him for decades. Wow. That's who you're seeing.
So great. Yes, right here.
Thank you. This was such a beautiful movie. It made me cry. Oh, thank you. It really made me cry. My question is, did it turn out that Fred Rogers and Tom Hanks are related?
This happened at our New York premiere that somebody didn't. The question was, did it turn out that Fred and Tom are actually related? And it came up at our New York premiere that someone did an Ancestry.com thing, and they're actually sixth cousins related.
They are sixth cousins, apparently, yeah. And they share the same great-great-great-great-great-grandfather.
It's
right.
bizarre. I mean, we learned the first time that we had dinner with Tom and Joanne, the coincidence that Fred and Joanne's wedding anniversary is Tom's birthday.
And my parents' wedding anniversary.
Your parents' wedding anniversary. So it's like, that was a weird coincidence.
And also, Fred was really into numerology, so the fact that, there were these 143 was he had all of these things about numbers. So when number things would come up, it felt very connected and weird.
Yeah.
And then it felt, and then we all learned that on the same day.
It's wild. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah! Hey, wow! You should have been in the Chinese restaurant.
There you are. Yes.
Hey.
Woo!
Nice sweater.
I want to thank you for kindly bringing this to life and opening it on the 56th anniversary of the day that Jack Kennedy was shot, which might have opened this whole horrible time that this country is going through. And I think we ought to show this on a national night out for everybody in this country, and I think it would be a night of therapy for everybody.
I think so, too.
Oh,
and on that note, I have to get them somewhere, but, tell your friends to go see A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood and spread a little kindness, too. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you all.
Can I say